Welcome back to Happy Home with Dan and LaTane. We are a real estate couple that focuses on faith, family, and financial freedom. This is episode 7.
Where to get started in real estate investing.
Well, let's pray. Because that's where you should start with
Everything
this.
starts with prayer.
Because it's a crazy ride along the way. But, obviously for us, investing in real estate has been good. It started a long time ago when I bought that first course from Carlton Sheets. Just not having a clue. I didn't know what a title company was. I didn't know anything. And so what he taught was residential. He talked a lot about bread and butter, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and it had a garburator. Not a garbage disposal. It was a garburator. I'll never forget that 20 some years later. So, I think you really need to start focusing on, and I think we've alluded to this some, of your personality, who you are, what time you have, what's your risk tolerance, what's your financial, do you have lots of money? Do you don't, do you not? And I think a lot of this will help you kind of funnel into where you want to be.
That's stepping back and maybe taking first almost like a personality inventory of yourself of what do I really want to do here? What time am I willing to give up? What am I looking to focus mentally on this because of everything else going on in life? Do I want to do it alone? Do I want to have someone working with me? Just kind of looking at yourself first of what you are willing to do, what you're not willing to do, and make a list. And when you start looking at specific deals, if it doesn't meet your list, then maybe that's not the deal for you, and you keep moving on and keep looking. So I think that's a very good place to start is personally, what do you want to do? And we can say that now because when we started, we had no clue. We just bought anything and everything and just moved. And if it was great for us, awesome. And if it wasn't, we just kind of powered through.
Well, and part of it is we didn't have kind of some of these resources that are out there now with, social media, with all the different options of getting education and stuff. I started by reading books. Mm-hmm. And then, like I said, getting this one Carlton Sheets program. And it was, and I think by the time we got married, I think I had 2 or 3 other courses, mm-hmm. And it just kind of built on each other. But I think it's important that your personality, going back to goals, what's your goal? What type do you want to do? Well, if you want to be a multimillionaire in 6 months, flipping single family houses, you're probably not going to be a multimillionaire, that quick. Yeah. But if you want to say you have a 5-year goal of, I want to own this many properties, I think all that goes back to what type, what size, because obviously we learned through our apartment buildings, it was easier to scale. You get larger numbers, and it does come down to when you start looking at deals. We always used to think it was smart to buy a single family house because we could afford it. We knew that. But as we started getting bigger and we started doing more stuff, we've joked and we just said it's just adding zeros to it. It's just a bigger number.
And I think part of that also when you're looking at yourself and like you mentioned, your goal, are you looking for creating cash flow now? True. Because that's going to be a different purchase than looking for just a long-term investment opportunity that I want to have some income when I retire.
And from a personal level on our side, what was it that we were doing? We were buying stuff that we could try to get as much cash flow.
Yeah.
Where did we find those? In the not so nice areas of town.
Yeah.
The rough, dealing with a little bit more management intensive. That's why we ended up going to the weekly rentals. When we had that duplex, it was a great duplex, great location. We could do a year lease.
Yeah.
But the problem was for us, there was zero cash flow. Yeah. And every year we would have to renew that lease.
And it got frustrating to us because it wasn't meeting that goal that we were trying to achieve.
Exactly. So
we
I think
sold
that's a
it.
perfect example
Yeah.
of, what is your goal? Now we don't necessarily need as much cash flow, and we've kind of been doing a little bit of transition in our real estate portfolio where we just sold off 4 quadruplexes that would have been great cash flow, but they were a lot more management intensive.
Yeah.
And we bought, our duplex that we just bought recently that is not, it's more of a higher end. We're getting a little bit, higher end tenant. They're able to pay online, things like that. So it goes back to, like you said, it's what are you looking for? If you're looking for cash flow, then you might have to go in I don't know, single family, or probably not single family. If you're wanting huge cash flow quick, you might want to look at doing multifamily. You might want to look at doing storage, something like that. But if you're looking, and it goes back to management as well, multifamily, that's a big management thing.
It is.
So I do agree with you. I think that when people look at things, you need to look at what's your goals, cash flow, equity, what are you looking for?
So the other thing you also want, once you kind of establish that on the personal side, then look at, okay, I'm a handyman. I've done handiwork all these years. I want to be able to put some of my own skill into it. Or is it the other side? I don't know how to do anything, or I don't want to do anything because I do that day in and day out. I'm going to hire some contractors. Well, are you going to be able to flip a house with contractors being booked out for weeks at a time? Right now, they're hard to get a hold of. If not, maybe you need to buy a rental property that is currently rented. It needs some work, but as I can work that in, then that'll be great, but it's not as pressing for the moment. So this is something else. Do I want to put a lot of personal time into it? Do I want to hire people? And what is that going to look like? If you're doing a major overhaul flip and you're planning on doing it all with contractors, that absolutely can be done. But before you buy it, you better talk to some people and make sure, because there are a lot of contractors that don't do flips. They only do new construction. So you want to, hey, this is what I'm looking at. Is this something you would even quote for me?
Right. And understand that there's a lot of time in that management, even though you're not personally doing the work. It's meeting, getting quotes. It's, checking to make sure that the work's done right.
Making sure the project is moving along, because you're just one project for that contractor who probably has several jobs, and he's not going to keep an eye on it as closely as you will, because he doesn't have as much skin in the game as you do.
And, just on a personal side with us, we started, I didn't necessarily have the skills, but I had the ability. I could learn very quickly. The example of when we paid that plumber to come in and set the toilet and to put the dishwasher and countertop on. And I kind of watched him, saw what he did, and I wrote him the check. And I remember saying to him, thank you for the education. I'm not going to need you to set that toilet anymore. But my mind just went blank. We were talking about
knowing what you're wanting to do, if you're going to have the contractors or if you're going to do it yourself. It's more, it's kind of all, if you're going to get started, it's almost goal setting, but in a couple of different areas. It's personal. What is my personal goals? What do I want to do? Then it's the property. What am I looking at for goals on the property? Am I going to be hands-on? Am I going to hire contractors? And then it's going to be another goal. Do I want to do this alone? Do I want to partner? Do I want to have a couple people come in? That's something else you're going to want to look at. If you don't want all the risk on yourself, then maybe you want to look at having a partner or two, or if you're like, hey, I'm jumping all in and I'm going to just do it, then no, you don't want to have anybody else. But that is something else you need to ask up front of yourself, so you have your list in place. When you start looking at possible real estate deals, does this fill all my boxes? Is this what I want to do long term, short term? The skill set, everything. Because if you go into it blindly, hey, I just want to do real estate, well, that means a million different things. Are you looking to build a long-term portfolio? Are you looking to put cash in your pocket? I mean, these are just questions that you have to answer up front to go into it, kind of an organized fashion. I mean, we did just jump in, but again, we didn't have the resources and we were 20 years old and had no clue what we were doing.
And I think it goes back to what we've talked about several times. You can change too.
Absolutely.
We've gone just because of the real estate market. We were doing flips like crazy, and then we went into rentals. There's not a definite, but I think to get a basis, to get just that foundation, kind of set your goals, what you're really focusing on, because it'll allow you to get to that why of why am I doing this? When you hit those hard times of, I remember when we were flipping a lot and we needed money. That's why we were flipping, and I would go work on these houses, and it, when I was tired, it was like, okay, if I get this done, we can make $20,000.
Yeah.
It allowed me to get that cash that we needed.
So the one thing we haven't talked about, but I want to at least mention it, is funding. And I know you even said that freaks people out because it's like, oh gosh, I want to buy a property, but how in the world? I can't. So there are no going in that if you have your goals set, you know what you want to do, you have a good idea of where you want to start, you have a good idea of how you're going to structure it, know that if you find the deal, money's out there. If you start asking around, if you start putting feelers out, start checking all these resources, and we will delve more into this later about how to find funding and how to fund a project. Know that you can find the money one way or another.
Well, one of my coaches, he said, if you have a deal, the money will come to it.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know me better than anybody. What was the one thing that we struggled with for years? We went to banks.
We did.
And we were like, we got to have this money. And in the last 4 or 5 years, the faucet of understanding that the resources are out there that are so far beyond what we could ever imagine. And, when he first started saying that, when I got into storage, I was like, we've struggled with this. This has been such a hard situation for us. And then all of a sudden, throughout the last 4 years, I've just seen, he's right. If you have the deal, that's the key, though.
You have to have the deal.
Is where you struggle is when you don't have the deal.
When you're trying to make something work, the money might not show up quite as easily. But because
your investors want to have a return on their money, and they're going to look at the deal and they're going to say, this is kind of questionable. Where if you're funding it or you're doing it, with a bank, you can do a little bit of a narrower deal, and that's kind of tends to be what happens with newer people is they tend to focus on getting a deal, and the deal's narrow. And as you progress in your real estate, you tend to start looking at deals differently.
Yeah.
And you start saying, okay, now we can pull in a partner. We can pull in some lenders because that deal is that much, that good.
Because and you've mentioned several times how you can change over the years. When we first started, the bank, the first couple of deals gave us the money for the house and the fix-up money.
Fix-ups.
Because it was a local bank. We actually had a fabulous relationship with the president through a mutual friend. It was a wonderful setup. And then that changed. Yep. And the first time we had a flip, and it was a private investor that gave us the money for the flip, but he said he would not give us the money for the fix-ups. My heart just dropped to my stomach because I was like, how are we going to do this?
The whole way that started was I knew this guy had some cash, and I asked him, I was like, would you partner with me on this? Thinking, because I sat in the driveway saying, I have no money. Why am I even looking at this house? And I asked him, I said, hey, would you partner? And he goes, how about this? I'll make it even better. He said, I'll finance it for you. And that's how our relationship started for him investing with us. But yeah, when I came home, I was like, I'd already had it made up in my mind, though, that I was going to buy it and I'll figure it out. And I was like, yeah, let's put it on every credit card that we got.
And that's because when, we didn't have the money for the fix-ups up front, we just had to adjust. So it's like, I'm hesitant to say, when you're getting started, you need to know funding, but yet don't freak out. Know that if you find the deal, you can find the money.
And this is the thing, is having the money and having the knowledge of how to get your funding. You know, we talk a lot about this. We have bought hundreds and hundreds of properties that we had no idea how we were going to fund it. But we knew that as we got into it, we had resources, we had knowledge of how to do it. But when you go look at something, you might not know right at that moment, but you have different avenues. And as you do deals, you learn to be creative. You learn to hey, I could partner with this person, or I could, borrow money from this. We were just talking to Jeremy today about getting a HELOC, using your home as, having a home line of credit to where you could use that as a down payment for something. There's so many different options, but you can't let that be a stumbling stone, but you also have to make sure that through your mentor, through online education, I can sit here and laugh and we'll talk about, resources and options that you have for education in the future. But, up until 4 or 5 years ago, mine was books.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize I was just in the grind and working on houses and stuff that I didn't get involved with online forums. I didn't get involved with real estate groups locally. I just read books.
Yeah.
So get involved with local communities, national communities, get involved with a mentor, because there are a lot of people that I've learned that are a lot smarter than I am. This has nothing to do with how smart I am and that we have all the answers.
Yeah.
Everything that we've talked about, we've learned from other people, willing to give us their time, through our title companies and everything else, people have poured into us.
They have.
And I think that's part of what you need to understand is you've got to get out there and be willing to learn and educate yourself to where you can figure out what makes sense and talk to people in these different asset classes. People are willing to give you advice or give you their experience. Find someone that does commercial. Find someone that just does nothing but residential. Find someone that does storage. Talk to those people.
And be open-minded when you talk to them. Don't have a narrow viewpoint that you feel like you already know because you've heard. When they say something that sounds really off the wall to you, if they are in that asset class and they have been successful, even if it sounds off the wall to you, I'd take their advice because they probably know what they're talking about.
Or that gives you an opportunity to ask more questions. Hey, from my limited knowledge or what people have told me, that doesn't make sense to me. Can you explain that more?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's that education that you can continue to
but just be open-minded to know my way of thinking might be incorrect. I might be correct, but when people start talking to you, ask questions and get an explanation, not just a flat answer, but get an explanation of where that comes from and be open to hearing what others have to say. Don't just ask one person.
No.
That's what, get involved in several different forums and groups and ask. And because again, people have so many different ways of doing the same thing. And so many different ways. Our philosophy is a lot different than a business partner that we've had in the past. We're not wrong. He's not wrong. It's just
Correct.
a different way of thinking and operating. So get several different ideas and be like, oh, okay, well, I don't care for that way because that makes me feel uncomfortable, but this way is good. I can connect a little more with that. So know that there is so many different ways to get involved and to get moving. But know your limitations and know yourself first and foremost.
And know your strengths.
Yes.
That's something that I've taught to a lot of guys. Hey, we'll talk more about this as well, but, we're not big with partners where I know one guy, he's like, man, I wouldn't do it without partners.
Yeah.
He said, because they have this skill set, my other partner has this skill set, and I have this skill set.
Yeah.
So where that's very uncomfortable for us, it goes back to the very first statement you said, know yourself.
Know yourself.
Start doing a personal inventory, looking and figuring out where you fit in this world of real estate and where your goals are to where you can be successful.
Absolutely. I completely agree.
So I think that's
very
simplistic. I don't think that
it does sound very simplistic, but when you sit down and start taking kind of a personal inventory, it's like, well, I don't really know. So you kind of got to sit there and ask yourself some hard questions and think through it and know in the end, I really have never thought about it in that for myself that way, but this is how I think. This is my philosophy. This is my theory, and knowing these things before you get started.
And I think us being open and honest, you alluded to it, but I think we need to kind of talk about it, is we were very poor in this aspect.
We were. Because again, I was 20, you were 23 when we got married. You already owned one. Well, you owned one. We bought the duplex before we got married. We lease purchased another house when we got married. We just jumped in. We had no clue not only what we were doing, but where we were going, what our goals were. We were just doing. Yeah. And it would have really helped us in the beginning to step back and say, okay, what are our goals here, rather than just, hey, it's for sale, let's buy it. Right. Because there are some things we probably wouldn't have bought, and there are some things that we passed up on that we would have bought. There's some things that we sold that we would have kept had we known these things about us and about our philosophy, way before now.
So I think of the conversation that we had with Caleb yesterday.
Yeah.
That was what we're talking about is exactly what we told our 17-year-old son's best friend that's getting ready to graduate high school, is take an inventory. What are your goals? What do you want to do? And sometimes I feel bad telling people this because we didn't do it.
But it's been a learning process.
It's from that learning experience.
We've learned if you'll do this up front, some of this in real estate will be a lot easier because you'll know exactly what you're looking for. And then even what we've said a couple of times now, you know kind of where you want to start, you get in it, and then you're like, okay, you know what, I want to switch some of this up because my mindset's changed. And, this is always evolving, and it doesn't have to be if you're happy where you're at, but it can be. No, nothing's written in stone. You buy a rental property, you're not bound to buy rental properties the rest of your life. Anything can be fluid. But just knowing a starting point of who you are, where you're planning to go, what those goals are, is going to help make the process, especially in the beginning, so much easier, and just a mentor, a group, giving you some advice, that is a big piece of advice that I think we can give.
And another thing you said is listen. Listen to what people are saying. And I'll give an example. We had a partner in storage. Good guy, very successful. But I remember back to my very first mentor, David. He told me, he said, partnerships are marriages. Mm-hmm. And when my partner in storage and I started talking, we talked about that. I didn't realize it. And I didn't take a self-evaluation and really look at who I was, my controlling. I like to be in control. I like to make the decisions. And so when we got into that partnership, it just didn't go the way that we expected. So I think it's really important that not only do you listen to what people are saying, really, really, really look at yourself and be honest with yourself. Be honest
with yourself,
because it'll make it a lot easier as you get into it. Because we have done, it's funny how I feel like we're being quite vulnerable right now but this has been a struggle for us.
And being honest with yourself to say, you know what? We really shouldn't have bought that. We were a little bit lofty in our thinking to think, we can take anything on, when really that wasn't at all what our goal was. And in turn, we kind of worked through it and sell. But it's like there are things that had we stepped back and said, okay, this really doesn't suit what we're going for, we could have made some different decisions over the last 20 years. Yeah. So,
but I will say, don't get discouraged because we're where we're at because we took those steps.
Yeah.
Don't allow overanalysis to create paralysis.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're still progressing forward, taking steps so that you can get in the game and not be sitting on the sidelines. Absolutely. 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
Absolutely.
So, wow.
I think that was good.
You think so?
I do.
All right. Anything else?
No. Next time we can move on to talking about some resources for education and where to start learning.
Okay. Sounds good.